Lena, a child isn't a pawn for your games. Choose now, us or your past life. My husband's accusatory words cut through me like a knife. I stared at him in stunned silence, struggling to process the ultimatum he had just delivered. After 10 years of marriage, I never imagined Dean and I would end up here, locked in a vicious battle with his overbearing parents over the future of our daughter. "What are you saying?" I finally managed. Dean's face was hard. "I'm saying you need to get your priorities straight. My parents have Mia's best interests at heart. You're the one putting your selfish desires first." "That's not fair," I shot back. "All I want is for Mia to have options, to pursue her own dreams. Your parents want to control her, mold her into what they think she should be. I won't let my daughter's spirit be crushed like that." Dean laughed derisively. "So now my parents are monsters? They've given Mia love and stability her whole life. You're the one who fills her head with nonsense about careers and travel and God knows what else." "Encouraging her independence is not nonsense," I retorted. "She deserves to make her own choices." "Well, right now, she's choosing to listen to my parents over you. That should tell you something." I flinched, the words hitting their mark. Ever since Dean's parents moved in with us 2 months ago, they had been working to undermine me with Mia, whispering criticisms about my parenting, my career, my dreams, all in an attempt to mold me into the meek, subservient woman they expected a wife and mother to be. I wouldn't bend to their will, but their poisonous words were taking root in Mia's mind. Lately, she had become distant, defiant even. I was losing her. "Mia is just a child," I said evenly. "Your parents are manipulating her. Can't you see what they're doing?" Dean shook his head angrily. "You're imagining things. All I see are my parents generously helping us, only to be repaid with ingratitude and resentment from you." I stared at my husband, this man I once thought I knew entirely. When did we become strangers? "I'm not choosing between you and them," I said quietly. "The only one I'm fighting for is Mia." Dean's eyes flashed. "No, you don't get to make this just about our daughter. This is about you and your selfishness." His voice rose. "Ever since you started your little baking business, you've changed, become ambitious, independent. My parents see it too." I bristled, anger flaring in my chest. "My business is to set a good example for Mia, to show her she can have her own dreams." "Well, it stops now," Dean snapped. "You will respect my parents' authority in our home, or you will remove yourself from it." The words landed like physical blows. Dean was delivering his parents' ultimatum. After a decade together, he had chosen their side, separating himself utterly from the woman he had once sworn to cherish. In that moment, something broke irreparably between us. But I was not broken. A strange calm settled over me as I faced my husband's steely gaze. "I will not be driven out of my own home," I said steadily. "If you want me gone, you'll have to drag me out yourself." I held Dean's stare, seeing uncertainty creep into his anger. My defiance had caught him off guard. Finally, he looked away. "I'm going to the office to let you cool down. We'll discuss this later." He turned and left without another glance at me. I listened as the front door slammed shut behind him. Alone now, I allowed the panic and hurt to crush in. But I pushed them down, focusing instead on the fierce resolve building within me. I would not be controlled. I would fight for my daughter and our freedom, no matter the cost. Justice would be done in the end. I was sure of it. I was clearing up after dinner when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Moments later, an expensive sedan pulled up the driveway, delivering the last 2 people I wanted to see. My in-laws had arrived, unannounced as usual. I steeled myself as Eleanor and Gerald made their way into the house, not bothering to knock. "Oh, good, you haven't started on the dishes yet," Eleanor said by way of greeting. "I'll take over. You always leave spots." I bit my tongue as she ushered me away from the sink. 1 fight a day was my limit. "Where's our darling granddaughter?" Gerald asked, glancing around. "She's at a friend's house," I replied tightly. "Again? That girl is never home anymore." Eleanor tutted as she aggressively scrubbed a plate. "All this gallivanting around is why she's become so insolent lately. Mark my words." I didn't respond, refusing to take the bait. I knew Eleanor was provoking me, trying to get a reaction. She wanted an excuse to criticize my parenting. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Just then Dean arrived home from work. I felt a twinge of unease, unsure what to expect after our blowout this morning. "Mom, Dad, what a nice surprise." he said warmly, embracing his parents. He didn't so much as glance in my direction, so this was how it would be. Dinner was a predictably unpleasant affair. Gerald dominated the conversation, lecturing me on how Mia's willfulness was a direct result of my lax parenting. "That child has no discipline, no moral grounding," he remarked disdainfully between bites of pot roast. "But what can you expect when her own mother traipses around pursuing selfish interests instead of focusing on her duties at home?" "Yes, it's shameful," Eleanor agreed. "A mother should devote herself fully to her family, not waste time on frivolous hobbies." Their pointed words made my face burn, but I held my tongue. Arguing would only delight them. Dean, of course, remained silent. I fought down the anger rising within me. After dinner, I retreated to fold laundry while Dean took his parents out onto the back patio. I could hear their muffled voices through the open window as I matched socks with trembling hands. "You need to get control of your wife," Gerald was saying. "She refuses to accept her rightful role, and it's poisoning your daughter against tradition." Eleanor chimed in. "That poor girl doesn't stand a chance if Lena keeps filling her head with this feminism nonsense." Their words turned my simmering anger into fury. I could tolerate personal attacks, but I would not let them disparage me to my own daughter. I was done being compliant. It was time to fight back. I abandoned the laundry and marched out to the patio, interrupting their conspiring. 3 heads swiveled in my direction. "How dare you," I seethed. "You come into my home uninvited and insult me to my face, but I will not stand by while you tell lies about me to my daughter." Dean looked uncomfortable. "Lena, let's not do this again," he muttered. Ignoring him, I stepped closer to my in-laws. "If you have something to say about my parenting, you will say it to my face, not behind my back. Mia is my daughter, not yours." Gerald's mouth twisted angrily. "You are out of line. We will not be spoken to with such disrespect." Eleanor gave me a disgusted look. "And you wonder why the girl doesn't obey you? Look at the example you're setting." I shook with rage. "Get out," I spat. "You are no longer welcome here." For a suspended moment, everything was still. Then Gerald rose menacingly. "You'll regret this insult," he said. Then he stormed away, Eleanor rushing after him. Dean watched helplessly as his parents drove off in a huff. Then he turned to me, his eyes unreadable. For better or worse, the gauntlet had been thrown down. My skirmish with the in-laws was now open warfare. I had chosen my ground. Now I could only hope I was ready for the fight ahead. Over the next few weeks, the tension in our home became unbearable. My in-laws continued their campaign against me, while Dean stood idly by. Eleanor critiqued my every move, from my cooking to my clothing choices. "Are you sure that blouse is appropriate for a married mother?" she clucked. Gerald's favorite weapon was wielding authority over Mia. He countermanded my instructions to her, encouraged her defiance, and even tried to introduce her to prospective private schools without my knowledge. Through it all, Dean remained silent, refusing to intervene. I felt utterly alone. One evening, Eleanor arrived to babysit while Dean and I attended a work function. When we returned, I found her in Mia's room, going through her clothes. "Some of these outfits are unsuitable," she declared, holding up a cute sundress. "Little girls shouldn't bear so much skin. I'm getting rid of the inappropriate ones." "You will do no such thing," I said angrily. "Those are Mia's clothes that I bought for her. You have no right." Eleanor's lips thinned. "I have every right to ensure my granddaughter dresses appropriately. If you won't do it, I will." We argued heatedly until Dean stepped in. "Mom, let's just all take a breath. I'm sure we can work this out reasonably." "There is nothing reasonable about this," I fumed. "Your mother is trying to control our daughter, and you're letting it happen." I stared furiously at my husband until he looked away, cowed. Seething, I grabbed the clothes from Eleanor. "Get out of my daughter's room," I demanded. "You've overstepped your bounds for the last time." A week later, I hosted a family dinner that went disastrously awry. Gerald made several crude jokes about my baking hobby. Women don't need careers. The kitchen should be the only place they work. I was about to unleash on him when Mia spoke up first. "Grandpa, stop being mean to Mom. She loves baking, and her treats make people happy." "Don't be insolent, child," Gerald snapped. "You should learn respect, not mimic your mother's foolish notions." "Don't speak to her that way," I intervened. "My daughter has a right to her own opinions." Gerald's face purpled with rage. In my day, wives and children knew their place. It's time this family returned to tradition before the rot spreads further. He pointed his fork at me threateningly. Either you start obeying as a wife should, or you can remove yourself from this household altogether. I sat perfectly still, fury freezing me in place. How dare this man try to banish me from my own home and family? The rest of the meal passed in unbearable silence. Afterwards, I pulled Dean aside. This has to stop, I implored him. Your parents are destroying our family. Whose side are you on? Dean ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm not taking sides, I just want peace. His spinelessness infuriated me. There can be no peace while your parents are holding our family hostage. Don't exaggerate, Dean chided. They only want what's best for us. I stared at him in disbelief. When had he become so blind? It was obvious I was on my own here. Fine, I thought resolutely. If it was a battle they wanted, I would bring the fight to them. The time had come to take action. I was through being passive. My in-laws had underestimated me for the last time. I would expose them for the manipulative snakes they were. One way or another, I would take back control of my family. Justice would be done. Did you hear about Lena? That poor man, saddled with such a negligent wife. My friend Rita's words made me freeze. We were at our weekly coffee catch-up when she suddenly changed the subject to gossip about me. What are you talking about? I asked carefully. Rita leaned in, savoring the dramatic moment. Word is you left your daughter home alone for hours while you were out gallivanting. Poor thing wandered the streets looking for you. I stared at her in shock. It was a complete fabrication. I would never leave Mia alone like that. Immediately, I suspected my meddling in-laws were behind the rumor. It was exactly the kind of lie they would spread to discredit me as a mother. I quickly excused myself from Rita and rushed home, incensed. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Eleanor chatting on the phone. She avoided my gaze as she quickly ended the call. Who was that? I demanded. Just a friend, she said breezily. I stepped forward furiously. Was it another person you were telling lies about me to? Eleanor scoffed. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, I said through gritted teeth. You told people I abandoned my daughter. How could you stoop so low? Eleanor lifted her chin defiantly. I did no such thing. But if you were more focused on your maternal duties instead of yourself, we wouldn't need to have this conversation. I trembled with rage. How dare you turn your vile behavior around on me? You have no right to slander me to cover up your own shameful meddling. Just then, Dean walked in, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? He questioned. Your mother is spreading vicious lies about me, I responded heatedly. She told people I neglected Mia. Dean frowned and turned to his mother. Mom, is this true? Of course not, Eleanor huffed. Lena has become paranoid. I was simply chatting with an old friend. I could see Dean's hesitation as he weighed our statements. Dean, please listen to me, I implored. She is trying to undermine me with these false rumors. You must see that. Dean shook his head tiredly. I don't know what the truth is, but you should try to understand how your actions might be misinterpreted by others. His equivocation enraged me further. Even presented with Eleanor's deceit, he refused to take my side. You know she's lying, I cried. How can you not defend your own wife? Enough, Dean snapped. I won't have you disrespect my mother this way. Perhaps we all need some distance right now. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Eleanor once more. Her smug expression made me want to scream. That night, I lay in bed fuming, unable to sleep. Dean's lack of support was the ultimate betrayal. If he refused to stand up to his parents' manipulation, I would have to play their games better than they could. A plan started taking shape in my mind. I would gather irrefutable proof of their misdeeds. I had avoided open confrontation before, but desperate times called for decisive action. The time had come to go on the offensive. My in-laws had cast the first stone, attempting to sully my reputation. Now they would reap the consequences of provoking a mother's fury. The next day, I went out and purchased a small hidden camera. I would be ready to catch them in their deceit. Let them revel in their petty gossip for now, I thought bitterly. Their downfall was coming. I would see to it myself. Justice would be served. Over the next few weeks, I gathered damning evidence against my in-laws. My hidden camera captured their most vicious attacks. One afternoon, Eleanor cornered Mia in the kitchen. "Why are you dressed like that?" she demanded, eyeing Mia's stylish outfit. "Young ladies should dress modestly. Your mother is letting you parade around like a harlot." When Mia defended her clothing choice, Eleanor snapped, "Do not argue with me, child. You need discipline, not lip." Later, I caught Gerald rifling through my personal documents. "A man should know his wife's business," he remarked when confronted. "I'm sure you have nothing to hide from family." The final straw came after Dean was unexpectedly called away on a work trip. Eleanor and Gerald pounced on the opportunity to attack me unchecked. "Off on another trip while his wife is left alone," Eleanor tutted loudly to Gerald. "Doesn't set a good example for his daughter, does it?" "No surprise the child is becoming unruly without proper leadership at home," Gerald replied. I seethed silently as they carried on maligning my character and fitness as a mother. When Dean finally returned, I urgently pulled him aside to play the recordings. "Your parents crossed a line," I told him. "Just listen, and you'll see." But Dean refused to even put on the headphones. "Invading their privacy will just make things worse," he argued. We fought bitterly as I struggled to make him understand the truth. But as usual, he remained infuriatingly passive. That night I lay in bed unable to sleep, Eleanor's vile words echoing in my mind. Suddenly I realized I had been going about this all wrong. Dean would never stand up to his parents. His loyalty to them blinded him to their toxicity. If I wanted to protect Mia from their poisonous influence, I would need to take drastic action. The next morning I called a lawyer. She reviewed my recordings and agreed I had grounds for legal action. "With this evidence, we can file for full custody of your daughter," she said. "I assume that's your priority?" "Yes," I affirmed. Securing Mia's future was all that mattered now. "Then we'll need to move quickly," she advised. "I recommend filing divorce proceedings right away. It will give us the advantage." Her words sent a jolt through me. After 10 years of marriage, I had never envisioned it ending this way. But I thought of Mia, and my resolve hardened. I would burn the whole house down if that's what it took to free her from my in-laws' grip. "Just tell me what I need to do," I told the lawyer. Later, I picked Mia up from school myself, wanting to seize a quiet moment alone with her. As she chattered away in the back seat, excitement lit up her face in a way I hadn't seen for too long. Looking at her glowing smile, I knew I was making the right choice. She was the only thing that mattered. That night I cooked Mia's favorite meal, and we laughed over shared memories. I tucked her into bed with extra hugs and kisses. Tomorrow the battle would begin in earnest. But tonight I held my daughter close, cherishing the simple joy of being together before our lives were irrevocably changed. For her sake, I would stay strong. I was ready to fight with ruthless courage to secure the peaceful, happy future she deserved. My in-laws had underestimated me, but that would be their downfall. They were about to see what a mother's fury could do. The next day, my lawyer set the wheels in motion. The fight for my daughter had begun. Justice was coming for my in-laws, and I would be its instrument. The day I exposed my in-laws' duplicity was one I will never forget. Dean stared at me in dismay as I laid out my case against his parents. When I played the recordings of their vicious attacks, he went pale. "How could you do this?" he asked dully when the clips ended. I clenched my fists. "How could I not? Your parents have been poisoning our home for months. I warned you, but you chose to ignore it." Dean passed a trembling hand over his face. I had no idea they'd said such horrible things to you." His ignorance fueled my anger, because it was easier to assume I was overreacting than confront the uncomfortable truth. Dean looked shaken. "You're right, I should have listened to you more, but we can work this out reasonably." I cut him off sharply. "No, the time for reason is over." I slapped the divorce papers down on the table. Dean gaped at them in disbelief. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said quietly. "But your parents' influence is toxic. I have to get Mia away from them." Just then, Eleanor and Gerald arrived, summoned for an urgent family meeting. Their smug faces soured when they saw the divorce papers. "What is the meaning of this?" Gerald blustered. I rose and went to the TV. "This." Their shocked protests filled the room as I played the recordings of their slander and manipulation. Dean watched, hollow-eyed, as the evidence of his parents' malice unfolded. When the videos ended, you could hear a pin drop in the deafening silence. Gerald's face was purple with rage as he turned on me. How dare you smear us with such lies? I crossed my arms defiantly. They are your words. I have shown my husband the truth. Your reign in this house is over. Gerald advanced toward me, but Dean stepped forward. No, Dad, she's right. I should have seen your toxicity sooner. His voice broke. Please just go. Eleanor shrieked. We are your family. You would choose this woman over your own parents? When Dean just looked at the floor, his mother became hysterical. She has poisoned you against us. As Gerald led the sobbing Eleanor out, he turned to spew one final threat at me. You'll regret this betrayal, he snarled. We will see you ruined for it. Their departure left an unbearable silence hanging over the room. Finally, I turned to Dean. I'm sorry you had to face that, I said gently, but it was the only way to break their hold on our family. Dean stared at me with red-rimmed eyes. I just don't understand where everything went so wrong. My heart ached for his pain, even after everything. Their manipulation was subtle, but the time for forgiveness is past. My priority now is my daughter's well-being. Dean looked down at the divorce papers, then back up at me. You would really separate Mia from me forever? I hesitated. Despite his failings, Dean was still her father. Perhaps if he finally understood the truth, we could avoid a bitter custody battle. There was still a chance Mia could have both parents in her life. If you have really seen your parents for what they are, and you're willing to change, then maybe. I began gently. Dean's head snapped up, a light reigniting in his eyes. In the aftermath of my confrontation with Eleanor and Gerald, their downfall was swift and profound. Word of the scandal spread quickly through our tight-knit community. Friends and neighbors, now privy to my in-laws' deceit, shunned them openly. After years of maintaining polished public facades, their reputations were destroyed virtually overnight. I took no joy in seeing them humiliated so completely, but I felt a sense of justice nonetheless. Their toxicity had finally been exposed. Eleanor took the social rejection especially hard. She lashed out wildly, accusing me of fabricating the recordings. But with the truth so undeniably laid bare, no one believed her wild conspiracy theories. Her daily hysterical phone calls to Dean and I soon became too unbearable. We were forced to cut contact, delivering the final blow to her delusions of familial control. You've destroyed this family, were her parting words to me during her last tirade. No, I responded evenly. You destroyed it yourself through your manipulation and lies. I simply shone a light on the truth. With Eleanor and Gerald's malign influence excised from our lives, Dean and I cautiously explored reconciliation. Our relationship was forever changed, but we both wanted to avoid the upheaval of divorce for Mia's sake. Dean seemed humbled by the revelations about his parents. I thought they acted out of love, he confessed, but now I see their behavior was rooted in something darker. I knew how profoundly difficult it was for him to accept their toxicity after a lifetime of devotion. His willingness to change gave me hope. Perhaps with time and effort, we could rebuild our family on a stronger foundation. Of course, Eleanor and Gerald's shadow still loomed over us. Enraged by their public disgrace, they immediately pursued legal action to regain access to Mia. But with irrefutable evidence against them, their efforts failed completely. The judge upheld the restraining order, keeping them firmly out of our lives. Their desperate last-ditch attempt to salvage control had backfired spectacularly. They had shown their true colors plainly in the courtroom, cementing their defeat. In the weeks following the trial, a profound quiet settled over our home. Mia seemed lighter, freed from the dark cloud her grandparents' presence had cast. She and I spent long days baking, laughing, and dreaming together again. Dean was still healing, but he invested himself fully in repairing his bond with Mia. Their long walks and heartfelt talks became a new evening ritual. Watching my daughter smile again was the greatest balm to my soul. The long nightmare was finally over. My family was coming back to life. Of course, I knew Eleanor and Gerald's toxicity would leave lasting scars. But the roots of their bitterness ran too deep for me to untangle. Their own dysfunctions had condemned them long before I came into the picture. In the end, I had simply stood up for myself and my daughter. There was nothing to regret in that, nothing to forgive myself for. Justice had been served, and my conscience was clear. Our lives were irrevocably changed. But as I watched Mia laugh joyfully while Dean pushed her on the backyard swing, I felt hope bloom anew. The future, now unclouded by my in-laws' darkness, shone bright with promise. 5 years later, our lives had found a new normal. The wounds from my in-laws' toxicity had scarred but healed. Mia was now a thriving teenager. Watching her grow into a confident, compassionate young woman was my proudest achievement. The shadows that had darkened her childhood were lifting. My relationship with Dean would never be the same. Too much hurt and mistrust still lingered, but we now co-parented amicably for Mia's sake. That was enough. My baking business continued to thrive and expand. After years of sacrificing my dreams to avoid rocking the boat, I now pursued my passions boldly. I had found my voice. Our home was now filled with laughter and light. I treasured the family gatherings with those who had stood by me, my parents, my sisters, my loyal friends. Together we celebrated milestones like Mia's graduation and achievements like the expansion of my bakery. No more walking on eggshells or managing toxic relatives. We were free. Of course, the memories of all we had endured still haunted me. Letting people in was not easy after having my trust shattered so profoundly. When darkness crept in, I would gaze at my daughter's bright smile and remember that it had all been worth it. Her future had justified any sacrifice. My in-laws remained firmly exiled from our lives as they deserved to be. Once or twice they attempted to re-establish contact, but I refused to welcome their toxicity back in. During one phone call, Eleanor broke down begging for access to Mia. "Haven't we suffered enough for one mistake?" she implored. But I remained resolute. The damage was too deep to risk exposing my daughter again. Their bitterness was an incurable disease. Quarantine was essential. Dean still struggled sometimes with guilt over cutting off his parents. "Is it right to condemn them forever over this?" he agonized. But even he understood the need to shield Mia. In trying to control her future, they had forfeited any place in it. It was a tragic but necessary severing. Watching Mia blossom freed from their darkness reaffirmed my decision daily. Her joyful spirit was all the absolution I needed. On the anniversary of the day I finally exposed their cruelty, I hosted a celebration for the family members who had become my rock. My parents toasted my courage. My sisters rejoiced in our unburdened sisterhood. Dean gave a tender speech praising my protection of Mia. And my daughter, eyes shining with love, presented me with a framed photo of the two of us on her first day of high school. "You gave me the strength to fly," she whispered. Looking around at those who had lifted me up when I had nothing left, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Out of toxicity and despair, we had built a new life of hope. The past could not be changed, but the future was ours to shape, and I would keep shaping it with faith, courage, and love, no longer a victim, but the author of my family's destiny. I raised my glass high to freedom from the shadows of yesterday and to the light of tomorrow. Light of tomorrow. Light of tomorrow. Light of tomorrow.